The webinar will begin shortly. Hello, everyone. I see that there are some people that continue to join, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sharon Roberson, President and CEO of the YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, A Decade of Progress, Advancing Community-Centered Approaches to Domestic Violence Prevention and Survivor Support. I am thrilled to have you join us as we reflect on the strides made in Nashville and Middle Tennessee over the past 10 years in the fight against domestic violence. The YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee is a provider of comprehensive domestic violence services. We are dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. For decades, the YWCA has been at the forefront of addressing domestic violence, working tirelessly to support survivors and create safe, supportive communities. Today, we are excited to have a distinguished panel with us. They will share insights and experiences that highlight our region's progress and the impact of community-centered approaches in domestic violence prevention and survivor support. Together, we will explore how collaboration, innovation, and advocacy have driven change, and how these efforts are laying the groundwork for even safer, more supportive future for all. So let's get started. Our incredible panel of experts will help us explain this journey that so many of our survivors face. Before we start, I would like to thank our generous sponsors, the Nissan Foundation, the Harness Foundation, and Alliance Bernstein. We do so appreciate their contributions to our mission. Now, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves before we begin. I will start with Ms. Brown.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ms. Brown, Mandii Brown. I am a licensed professional mental health counselor. I work in many spaces. I'm currently with TSU Counseling Center, along with working with Tennessee Higher Education Initiatives and Black Mental Health Village.
All right, Ms. Diane Lance.
Hello, glad to be here. Thank you. I'm Diane Lance. I am the director of Metro Government's Office of Family Safety that oversees our city's 2 family justice centers.
All right, Ms. Christina Johnson.
Hi, everyone. I am an assistant district attorney here in Davidson County, and I lead the prosecutorial team for the district attorney's office.
All right, and member of our family, YWCA's own Dr. Daffany Baker.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here this afternoon. My name is Daffany Baker. My role is Vice President of Domestic Violence Services for the YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee. I basically oversee just daily functionality of our Weaver Domestic Violence Center, which is the largest in the state of Tennessee. And I also do a lot of DV, just education, throughout the state, mostly, within Nashville.
All right. We're going to do this in a series of segments. The first segment is really a reflection on a decade of change. And Diane Lance has been at the forefront of our domestic violence work for a very, very long time. As she said in her introduction, she heads our Office of Family Safety. So we'll start off with Diane. We're reflecting on this whole decade of change. We know we have a long way to go, but we want to see, could you start by giving us an overview of the 2013 Nashville-Davidson County Domestic Violence Safety and Accountability Assessment Report? What were some of the key findings and why are they so significant?
Yeah, I'd love to. You know, it's a really interesting exercise that Nashville did that a lot of cities don't do, and they have struggles because of it. So, real fast to go back into the 1990s, around the time of the O.J. Simpson case, across the country, cities were really trying to work hard on doing a better job investigating, responding to, and prosecuting domestic violence cases. And Nashville was really at the forefront of that effort, with Judge Gail Robinson starting the city's first domestic violence division. So it went from being, called the love docket to being one of the most well-respected courts in our country. So with now 3 to 4 judges working on that. But then also we created a specialized domestic violence division in our police department. I believe there were 23 to 26 detectives at its start. And then next came specialized prosecutors. That's actually where I started my legal career, is when that division was first started. And so people came from across the country to see how Nashville did things, to understand our courts, to understand how we prosecuted cases without a victim, how we worked together as a team and together and coordinated our work. And so that was a really great time for collaboration. And then it just dried up. There's a few drops in the bucket that made that unwind. The city created a new courtroom, and so resources had to be deployed for that. We had a police chief that was not as in favor of having specialized divisions, so positions were not filled when they became vacant, and so it unraveled. And you can take years to build a great thing and a matter of months for that great thing to unravel because of neglect, and that's what happened. So in 2011, Mayor Carl Dean called for, at the request of Gene Crow and Judge Phil Smith, requested a domestic violence safety and accountability audit for our city to see how Metro government can better ensure victim safety and offender accountability. And so that went through all facets of how Metro government responds to domestic violence. That includes 911, patrol response, detective response, night court, where you get your order of protection, warrants and bonds are placed, the domestic violence courts, probation, and fatality review. So all of those things were assessed by over 100 people in our community, including survivors, our nonprofit partners, and police and sheriff's office and courts and all of that, and looked for 2 years at each of those aspects of how a case progresses with in Metro, and came back with some really important recommendations. There are 48 total recommendations, with the main categories being improving court safety and support for victims, creating more crisis advocacy for victims in our city, providing order of protection support for victims so they're not on their own, prioritizing high-risk cases. Since the 90s, a lot of tools have been created, evidence-based tools, to be able to identify which victims are at the highest risk, and our city wasn't utilizing those tools. So that was a really important recommendation. Training at all levels, have consistent and constant training. So everyone is staying up to date with each other and on best practices across the country, and to stay coordinated in what we do, to work together and to collaborate, and then always continue to assess our system so it won't be allowed to deteriorate in the same way. We do that in a lot of great ways. With our department, that's how we do it. So what we did after that assessment is, those are great recommendations, but the city decided to anchor those recommendations, to create anchors so this wouldn't go away. And our real anchor points is creating a department where I work now, the Office of Family Safety. It's the first of its kind in the country to have a department running its Family Justice Center work. We created our first Family Justice Center in our courthouse, the Gene Crow Advocacy Center. And that was the first court-based Family Justice Center of its kind in the country. And then also the third really large anchor is the Family Safety Center at 610 Murfreesboro Pike, which is walk-in available services 24/7 to victims of interpersonal violence. And that is the largest and one of the pointed to as one of the best practice family justice centers in the country. So we've made a lot of great strides and have worked to work together really closely in our task forces. We have a biannual summit where all of us, many of the people on this call, come together and talk through how our system is doing great and where it needs improvement and how we can work together to make that happen.
Thank you, Diane. And we're going to go back to this because what Diane is talking about, she is in charge of a very comprehensive center for individuals that are victims of violence in this city. And I think that it's very important for all of us to be aware of these services because many cities don't have this. I think you called it the Walmart of violence prevention or something like that. You can go in and get anything that you need and they can refer you to all these different resources in our city. But we have one of our panelists that now has to leave earlier than we imagined. So we're going to go back and get this covered and then go back to Diane. And this is work looking at the issue of building a stronger community response. We all know that there's a lot of trauma associated with being a victim of domestic violence. And we all know that sometimes the legal system has to adjust to reflect the community's needs. And so I'm going to ask Christina Johnson to discuss a program that has just started in our city. It's a DV Defendant Diversion Program. And I would like Christina to tell us a little bit about this initiative that helps survivors who find themselves caught up in the criminal justice system.
Thank you. And I knew you were putting me on blast when you said somebody just has to leave early. So I appreciate that quick turnaround and adjustment. But adjustment is key, right? So as Ms. Lance was just speaking about the O.J. Simpson, trial, and it's 30 years ago. And if we keep doing something the same way without flexibility and expecting a different outcome, it's I think that's the definition of insanity, right? So something that I noticed very quickly when I started in my role as a prosecutor was I was seeing defendants who were involved in the criminal justice system who were victims, right? And those cases always, tugged at my heart a little bit. And ultimately, we were doing the right thing as an office, and we were dismissing those cases to not add an additional burden to these victims or these survivors who were caught up in the criminal justice system by adding, court fees and probation fees and additional barriers and a conviction for whatever it might be, and adding burdens, then making them more reliant on their abuser, right? So we were doing half of the job as far as I saw it by getting rid of the criminal element. But because they're technically defendants, right, we weren't doing anything on the back end to help get them out of that system and to give them autonomy and independence, and be able to get out of that relationship. So it's been a few years now that I've been working on this. It's kind of crazy how some things just take so long, but I mean, it's like giving birth to a child, right? It takes time to make sure that they're healthy and then you get it right. So I've been working with the American Prosecutors Association and prosecutors in King County, which is Seattle, Washington, who have been doing this for a while now, and developed our own local criteria that works for us here in Tennessee. What works in other states, because of their rules and the way that they prosecute cases, and the way that we do things here in Tennessee is often different, right? So we can't model exactly the way that these cases are being handled, but we developed our own criteria. And it is basically individuals who find themselves involved in the criminal justice system who are victims of domestic abuse. And there is a nexus between those two elements, right? So I am caught with an offense where I am selling drugs, but I'm selling drugs for my abuser, who has beaten me up and made me go out and do this. Or I am stealing from the grocery store because the financial abuse is so strong that I don't have money to feed my kids. Or the one that we see pretty frequently is the abuser will be the first person to call the police and say that the victim was the aggressor, or take out orders of protection on the victim and then call the police and say they're violating the orders of protection. So I've worked with the defense bar, who has been very helpful, and worked on training our DAs. That's actually why I have to leave early, because we're having our DA conference and I'm going to be training everybody in our office about this. It's going to be great, on how to be able to accept evidence or proof that this person is a victim, right? So we're doing that through reviewing orders of protection that have been granted within the past year, looking at previous cases where, you know, the roles have been reversed, where the victim is the defendant is the victim. Or, you know, in some cases, the defense attorneys have been so great in bringing us evidence like, this person has never reported, but look, these are the bruises. These are, you know, this is what the house looked like. And now they're charged with, you know, an order of protection, a violation, or whatever the case may be. So what we're doing is we're collecting data from those people who are charged. And I am sending that data to Daffany, and we are referring the cases to the YW. On our end, as a procedural measure, we are retiring the cases so that they can be dismissed after the Y is able to make contact with that victim. Now, the DA's office is not micromanaging and saying that they have to be in a residential program, or they have to go to X many number of therapy classes or whatever. I am not involved in that. My goal is to meet people where they are, to give them autonomy, and to give them the resources to be able to leave that relationship either now or in the future when they're ready, and to have a happy and a healthy relationship moving forward, whether it's this one or the next one, right? But our goal, if our goal is to end domestic violence, we have to have an open mind to be able to say, hey, maybe this traditional method of just punishment is not working, right? And so we are looking at those on a case-by-case basis. We are only doing misdemeanors at this point. I know some other jurisdictions are, you know, doing the murders and the robberies, and we are not there yet. But we are doing misdemeanors at this case. We have 21 women who have been referred since we started on June 1st. So I did a quick math, and that's basically about one a week. So they come in waves, but if we are touching the life of at least one woman a week who has been caught up in the criminal justice system, and we are able to get them resources so that they can get out of a violent relationship, then we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I say that the we as in the DA's office, because we represent everyone in the state of Tennessee. And that includes even those who have been accused of crimes. We're supposed to be doing justice, and that means looking at everything with an open mind and a lens that is wide enough to understand that our ultimate goal is to end the violence.
All right. And I love this, because at the YWCA, we always advocate for transforming the justice system. And later on, Diane's going to talk a little bit about some ideas that we have to really make the system more workable for those who are survivors. Dr. Baker, do you have anything to add? Because you worked in tandem with Christina on this.
Nothing would work without Dr. Baker.
Yeah, I would just like firstly to say, like, this is just an amazing, you know, program, and for Christina to have did, you know, the work and the research, and even take out the time to notice the differences or the changes, or how we could be more effective as a whole for our community. So, I mean, just to see this kind of come to pass is just amazing. Because I have a heart for correction, and also now we're working in DV. It's kind of like the best of both worlds, because both populations have trauma, have lots and lots of trauma. So this program is just, I can see it, taking strides. Like she said, we have 21 clients right now, and we actually have one client that I work a little closer with, as to she happened to even get another charge, correct, Christina, since being referred. So she needed a little bit more support, right? So I mean, just giving those resources, she couldn't get around, just giving you a little tad bit of the help and support that we can provide. Just her not having the resources, being able to get around, giving her bus passes, getting her into support groups, that interviolence just support group, DV support groups, the batterers intervention, and just having someone that she can call to talk with, to work through things with, to safety plan with, it, has been just a major difference, in her life, and just other women as well, just her as an example. So we can definitely see like the goodness and just, what will come out, of this program to be.
And one thing I have learned from working alongside you, Dr. Baker, is that if you can support women who are victims of domestic violence, survivors, then you're really supporting the children. And over time, it saves our community, because you have children that get the support, because if that mother should go away, the children become part of a system that is not a system that supports them well. The best case circumstance, it is not a system that you would want children to go into. So a stronger survivor really makes stronger children. And we see it every day at the Weaver Center. Women come in and they say, I do not want to lose my children, but they don't often have the tools of understanding what they need to do to make sure that doesn't happen. Christina, do you have anything to add before you leave?
No, other than, our ultimate goal is to end domestic violence, right? And if we say that we support victims, sometimes they come in the form of a defendant. And so we have to be willing and able to do the right thing, which is not always the easiest thing to do. But as long as we keep doing the right thing, I really believe that we'll see transformative outcomes. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Okay, we'll go back to you now, Diane. We were looking at the history, and now let's go even further. We've made some progress, of course, and it got stalled and started and stalled. Could you highlight some of the most impactful changes or initiatives, such as the high-risk intervention panel or lethality assessments? And really, we're going to get to some gaps that still exist.
Yeah, I first want to go back to real fast to Christina. I mean, that is such an important program that you all are collaborating on. Imagine going to jail, being arrested, having court dates, and ever picking up the phone and calling 911 again. And so it's wonderful. So glad to see you all doing that. That's a great collaboration. So yeah, I sort of went over some of the biggest wins, I think, is, anchoring the work, making sure it's institutionalized, really hard to tear down. A lot of stakeholders working together. In terms of the programs that you mentioned, I would say the lethality assessment has been an enormous opportunity for our city to stop treating every domestic violence case as the same. Back when I was prosecutor, I'd have to figure out for myself which victims I thought were at high risk and which ones weren't. I had one case where, I think it was something as simple as a shove, but I didn't know the whole history of abuse, which apparently was very severe. So in my perspective, I'm dealing with a shove. And I think I continued the case with doing something or another. And 4 hours later, she came back into that courtroom and I was still there working other cases covered in blood because her offender had her at gunpoint for those entire 4 hours in the car, threatening to kill her, and then killed himself instead. So learning about the risk that a victim has, not just the case that is before you in a courtroom or before the officer that they responded to, is incredibly important. So the lethality assessment is an evidence-based tool that police use based off of the Jacqueline Campbell Danger Assessment. It's a shorter tool. And so police sit down with victims at the scene and go over 11 questions that will indicate the likelihood that their offender is going to kill or seriously injure them. And then if they rank at a level that the offender, they believe the offender is that high of a danger, or the officer on their own believes that that victim is at such a high risk, they get on the phone and call the YWCA hotline, and they then the victim will usually get on, and the Y can safety plan with them, talk to them about what they want to see happen. How do you stay safe with those choices? Maybe they want to go to shelter, so they start working on that. And then they make a referral to the Office of Family Safety to follow up with that victim later and talk about orders of protection, follow up on safety planning, the dangers, long-term dangers of strangulation and things of that nature. So it's it's just such a great way to work together beyond police show up, maybe you want to go to shelter, I drop you off at the Y, and then the next thing you know, you go to court. It's just not sufficient. So the lethality assessment is something great. And then our office reads every one of those that come back high risk, and there are a lot. I don't have the number in front of me. And then we pick the highest of high risk cases, whether that be based on officer belief or scoring a yes answer for those high risk behaviors out of 9 out of 11. And a high risk intervention panel looks at each one of those cases. And that panel includes the shelters, the health department, social services, I believe, might be on it, detectives, prosecution. And the real goal of that is to figure out how we can respond to the victim's safety at a rate faster than the offender's violence is escalating, to keep that victim safe. So that is, a wonderful thing that we have as well, to try to keep those highest risk victims safe. So an example might be the offender is on probation, state probation. And, we may not know that, the Y may not know that, but probation's at the table and they tell us that, and they didn't know that reoffense happened, but it was on panel. So now they know. So then that probation can be violated, and that offender now has some accountability for their actions. Sharon, you're muted.
That broke my own
So
rule.
glad it's not just me.
No, these two very significant initiatives, and I want everyone on the call to understand, not every community has taken these steps, so it's pretty significant. But the high risk intervention panel and lethality assessments can be used for purposes of prosecution later, I would assume. But can you share any ongoing challenges or gaps that remain in our approach to domestic violence? Because you talked earlier about things starting and then they're stalling, and we're always achieving, given what we're working with the DA's office on, a better system. Tell me a little bit about the steps the Office of Family Safety or things you're advocating for to help us address some of these gaps in the system.
So, it's a great lead in with the lethality assessment, because that one's actually in progress. So since we've had the lethality assessment, our office have wanted the commissioners to be able to see the lethality assessment before setting bond. We've made, strong efforts in that area, and we haven't really been able to get it to have legs, but you just don't stop in this field. Domestic violence is patient and persistent work. And so, when it doesn't work, you put it on the back burner until there's another opportunity. And so right now, really, really pleased that Judge Walker is our presiding judge, and she's making tremendous strides in ensuring that commissioners can see the lethality assessment before they make bond decisions. So that's just a wonderful something that's happened with patience and persistence, and having someone ready to put the, step forward and make that happen. So talking again about bonds, though, because that's a real issue. Our commissioners, again, are the ones that grant the warrants that police take out, and then they have to set a bond. And that bond will decide whether that offender will stay in jail up to and through the court date or dates, or get out on bond. And they can also set conditions on that bond. One of the big problems we have now is that commissioners are forced to make uninformed decisions. They do not have access to records beyond Nashville-Davidson County. And I think all of us as, community members would assume that, before you set a bond and you're looking at criminal records to decide what needs to be set to keep our community safe, that they would be able to see records beyond just our county. I mean, not even our larger, greater area. So if someone comes in and they have a long domestic violence history of strangulation in Murfreesboro, and that happened here in Nashville, when maybe they were, staying for the weekend, we're not going to know about that. They will look like a first-time offender to those commissioners. We do not have NCIC III access, which would show, not us, me, but the commissioners, to show what the criminal records are across the country. So maybe you've just moved here from California and you have a horrible record in California. Our commissioners won't know that, and you will appear to us as a first-time offender. So, Judge Todd, this has been something he's been deeply concerned about since he took the bench. And he said, we have to stop making these decisions with a Ouija board. Like, we need to have the information. And so one of the recommendations is to have those commissioners have judicial assistants that can look up to get access to NCIC III in the Tennessee database, so those commissioners can make informed decisions. So that's a really great one I hope to see will happen soon. We also are hoping to work towards those high-risk cases being put on a more fast-tracked docket. I like to call it a rocket docket, so they progress through our system more quickly. The time from arrest to disposition of a case at the general sessions level is about 95 days. And up in the criminal level, it'll take over a year, well over a year. And so what you want to do is get the high-risk cases to be handled, addressed, tried more quickly. When you take the horrible, horrible homicide of Lauren Johansson, where the offender's bond was reduced, and he got out, and there were some problems with how GPS was implemented in that case. But he got out, he bonded out, and brutally murdered her. There are lots of problems that went on in that, but the one I like to pay attention to is the fact that if that case didn't take over 7 months to be heard and tried, there wouldn't have been a decision on bond. That it never would have happened, because the evidence was great. There was going to be a conviction, I'm certain. And so he would have been already serving his time and not having a bond hearing in front of a judge who lowers the bond. So getting these cases resolved more quickly is really important.
And well, let's go back to a little bit of that, because working on the survivor victim side of it, what if this victim just says, I don't want anything to do with this? And I understand in that particular case, they were working with a situation like that. What other tools do we have in our community that we could, the victim wants to just forget about it. She doesn't want to get involved. And it's typically, we use those terms because it's typically, a female victim. I don't want anything to do with this. What should the community know about how those cases can still move forward?
So this is complex, and it was complex when I was prosecutor in the 90s as well. So you have to have strong prosecution despite that fact, or more and more victims are going to tell you that, because they know you're not going to be able to create any accountability. And if you can't create accountability for the offender in the court, what victim is going to come in there and stand on your side? So the prosecution is not, if I'm the victim, it's not Diane Lance versus my boyfriend. It is the state of Tennessee versus my boyfriend. And so that creates, it is very important to keep that distinction, because the state of Tennessee, our local Davidson County prosecution team, we've got a great domestic violence team that works really hard. They are, they're not just protecting that victim's safety, but our community safety. So, that offender is going to travel on to a series of other women over the course of a decade. And we have a responsibility to protect those future victims as well. So evidence-based prosecution is the tool that you use. It is hard. You do not want a new prosecutor trying to do victimless prosecution and base it only on the evidence without victim testimony. You need experienced prosecutors that are extremely well trained in how to do evidence-based prosecution. Christina is a great example of a well-trained prosecutor that knows how to do this. Because it's complicated. So evidence-based prosecution would be, okay, the victim, a homicide case, victims aren't there to testify who killed them. So we can do it in a domestic violence case as well, but you need to use the evidence that you're presented with. So oftentimes you'll have the 911 call. There might be ways to get that into the proof. The body-worn cameras. Our police are now wearing body-worn cameras right when they show up. Those body-worn cameras are not only going to reflect possible injuries, but also some excited utterances of what happened right then and there. And they might be able to get in some exceptions in there to get that as actual proof. You have EMTs and EMS that are showing up, and they are asking for medical history of what happened. So that's another tool that you can use, as well as, hospital records and experts in the domestic violence field, like folks on this call, about why victims recant, why they might not want to prosecute, what are the reasons for those things. So there are avenues like that. They take time, they take experience, expertise, and they also take a real strong commitment to domestic violence. You can never put someone, and I think all of our the people we're lucky in this field right now, the vast majority are very interested in domestic violence and are passionate about this work and can't do it without that at any level in any arena.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with maybe those other tools we've already implemented in the community, like the high-risk panel and the lethality, maybe some of those can be used to help support prosecutors who want to move forward with some of these cases. So thank you.
San Diego does a great example of evidence-based.
We've talked about there are different forms of domestic violence. We're talking a lot about the physical forms because that's really the easiest form of domestic violence for the court system to recognize. Someone's been physically injured, but there is a psychological and financial. Those are two aspects that are really significant in domestic violence. I'm going to ask you, Ms. Brown, could you talk about the mental health challenges that domestic violence survivors often faced and how these challenges impacted your own journey?
Yes, so I'm glad you said that. Domestic violence, especially in my realm, consists of physical, emotional, psychological, and financial. What I see in the state of Tennessee, because I'm not from here originally, you guys do focus more so on the physical aspect and sometimes the emotional and psychological side. But if you don't see the bruises, then it's harder to prosecute. But there are internal bruises that you guys do not acknowledge. So with my experience, I am a domestic violence survivor here. And when I went through my process, my person did physically hit me in my face and pull my hair, but I had no marks. And even though I had evidence of it, it's like a constant wheel going. And so the after effects of that, I felt isolation, which a lot of victims do within the community because you're prosecuting someone that could be well known. And so people do turn their backs on you. There is the emotional effect after. It's harder to regain and build relationships based off what you go through, and you definitely don't trust people. If it's financial wise, it's harder to get back on your feet because you're used to having someone take that control over you, and now the control is in your hand. It's kind of hard to weigh the scale on what to do and what not to do. And especially if that person did have all the resources, what are you left with? Mm-hmm. And so you said as far as impacted my journey, luckily I did have my own resources. I did utilize the safety center. I got an order of protection. I did use the victim advocacy in the courthouse. And I mean, for me, I feel like the victim advocacy portion was the biggest thing because I got to have my person come in the courtroom with me. She gave me fidgets to keep me calm because I was, nervous to be around my abuser again. I got to sit downstairs instead of going in the courtroom. So me and my daughters were in there and we were fed and we felt safe in that space because I knew going upstairs I could get re-triggered. which is always natural, like seeing someone or having a smell or even just being in a space. The courtroom, yes, it's supposed to prosecute and protect, but it's also very traumatic to be in there because then, you know, those emotional, psychological abuse, and you don't prosecute the person that is hurting me. Why am I constantly coming back? Where's the justice at? And so, which I also dealt with my person. He was ordered to do anger management, which I was not opposed to, but violated the order twice. Like after that, came and tried to break down my door, destroyed my backyard, and I still did charges and say he violated. But then said, "Oh, well, he did anger management. It's okay." But what about me and the justice that I need from you all to feel protected back in the community? And so now with working more with domestic violence victims in the mental health field, I get to see their aspect of that as well, whether it's a physical scar or internal scar. And of course, a lot of them are mothers. This has an effect on the children. The kids are starting now to act up. They're not having trustworthy relationships with people who don't want relationships at all or don't want to be touched. And so I feel that if Tennessee or the courts in general starts looking at those internal scars, because those have just amount of impact as the physical scars, things can definitely change, and it'll help benefit us as well with the acknowledgement and the validation that victims are needing.
Okay. Now, one thing I want to bring into this conversation, because you really described, I don't know if you were actually at the Gene Crow Advocacy Center, if they helped you here or you were in something similar enough. As you're at Gene Crow, okay. Diane, let's talk a little bit about this, because you know, this, and I'm just going to full disclosure. I have not been an advocate of anger management classes or batterers intervention. It's just something about it. And I know I have a dear friend, Tina Fox, that, you know, works very hard to make these work. And she's explained the women may go back, so let's go back in a better place. But Diane, give me a little bit more that you would like to add a little bit to that discussion about anger management. You're muted.
Thank you so much for asking me about that. And Mandii, it's just such a gift what you are telling everyone on this call. So I appreciate that. And I also have my fidget toy that we give people in court, because it's nerve-wracking to go to court and be in the proximity of your offender or your offender's family. So anger management is never an appropriate disposition in the domestic violence case. And I cannot say that more emphatically. Anger management is about anger. Domestic violence is about power and control, completely different things. It's about manipulation and controlling your victim. We do in our city have batterers intervention programs that do focus on that. And Tina Fox doing a great job trying to get those to be what she wants them to be and monitoring them appropriately. It is something that across the country, everyone is trying to work on how to make those programs more effective. We've got a national best practice that we're optimistic about potentially looking further into, but that's where we are. But it should never be an anger management program. And so that is where you need your prosecution team to just don't do anything rather than send them to anger management, because it's not going to do anything. I mean, unless you think it's not helpful. It's not resolving anything. Maybe it's giving the victim hope something will happen. As far as those internal injuries, I think that those, we often hear that from victims that those hurt so much more than the actual abuse in terms of hits and slaps and things like that. Those are the things that really stick around for a long time, if not forever. And so those are really important. They may not be actual crimes to prosecute by Tennessee statute. However, they are good background information for why a victim survivor may be reluctant in their testimony, the dynamics of going on. We still do live in a community of like, well, she should just leave. I mean, there are lots of reasons why that doesn't happen. And that consistent emotional abuse is a big part of that. So not a lot to say to that.
I was going to say a part of that consistent emotional abuse is victim blaming. So you telling me to, hey, let's leave, or go ahead and get the situation, I leave. But if this abuser keeps coming back and I'm telling, and it's like, no, the system isn't doing anything, what does that leave me with?
Yeah, it leaves you on your own.
And that is, of all the questions that I get asked about domestic violence all over the community, all over the state, all over the country, corporations, etc., the number one question is, why doesn't she leave? And I think that people need to deconstruct that and sort of look at it and understand the dynamics of the power and control cycle and all that goes on with domestic violence. So Dr. Baker, let's go to you. Could you touch on that subject, but also on some of the initiatives that the YWCA is involved with, including not only the Weaver Shelter, but Sheer Haven training for beauty professionals and Abbie Safe Home?
Well, just to hit on the first one, like you said, what you first talked about, why don't she just leave? That is a question that we hear, all the time, repeatedly. Why don't she just leave? But it's a lot of factors that tie in with that. Like, um, Mandii stated, like it's emotional, it's physical, of course, but like she said, not all the time. It's not physical, but it will ultimately become physical. It's so many layers with domestic violence. And as we all know that do the work, it usually takes someone 7 times to leave and to get their just everything together to leave and pretty much stay on their feet. Because it's a lot of times it is financial. They can't afford to leave. He is the power and control over everything, so they don't have the means to stand alone. Then a lot of times it's the children. You don't want to split the children up. You don't want the children, asking questions. You don't want, and then sometimes you do want to save a person's image. Don't want people to know what's going on. Don't want it to seem this way or seem that way. So it's a ton of different factors as to why people, don't leave. We just have to just meet people where they are, safety plan with them, and let them know that there are resources. And going into those resources, some more that we do have at the YWCA is, for one, we do have Abbie Safe Home, which is a pet shelter for clients that come in that do have pets, because a lot of work has been researched and statistics have shown that pets are considered parts of the family. Like, people do not leave their domestic violence situation if they can't go somewhere and take their pets. And a lot of times, if they're going to a family's home or if they're going, to stay with a friend, that's already enough on somebody else to take a family. Everybody don't want to take the family and the pet, right? So we're blessed to say that we've had Abbie Safe Home for 3 years now. And in the 3 years that Abbie's has been here, we have provided a safe place, over 4,000 nights of stay for animals. And that's cats, including dogs. And we also recently had a parakeet. So Abbie's has definitely been a blessing as we do serve, we're able to serve animals. And we also have Sheer Haven Initiative, and this Sheer Haven was, I think, in 2021, we founded Sheer Haven. It's an initiative for beauty professionals, along with Suzanne Post as co-founder. It's just a training for beauty professionals to be certified in domestic violence awareness. Because if you think about it, the salon is a place that women per se usually go alone, where they can talk to their, stylist and have intimate conversations. So we wanted to do something, where beauty professionals would be trying to notice the signs, where they would know how to talk to their clients and be able to give them resources, or just be a listening ear, it can safety plan and just be there for their clients, to just ultimately know the signs. So since 2021, we have trained, I think, over 135,000 beauty professionals, men and women. And we have made this like a legislation. We have legislation pending through Congress now called the Salon Stories Act. I think Senator Duckworth and Senator Blackburn are, behind that. So we're trying to make that just go as far as it can with legislation to just know that for everyone to know and understand the importance of domestic violence and domestic violence awareness, because it's happening. It is really a silent epidemic that nobody is really taking account for, nobody's noticing, and it's gonna take more than us. And I say us, the people that's doing the work, the people that, understands the work and the initiatives and the statistics. We need the community, to get involved in this. We need people to watch legislation, even on the local level, just to understand what's happening, because all of the laws that's being passed, it's like a snowball effect. Like it's affecting our world, it's affecting this DV world, it's affecting our children, it's affecting everybody, ultimately our community. The numbers are steady rising. It's a silent epidemic, and we all just need to work together to do our part in helping those numbers to decrease, and ultimately, hopefully, we can end it.
Yeah, and one of the things that we are looking at the YW is we try to educate. That's what the Salons Act is about, because we know that your hairstylist is not a therapist. She's not equipped to handle it head on, but she can give you resources and tell you where you need to go. Because the whole concept of, girl, you just need to leave him. Why would you stay there thinking something's wrong, or victim blaming is what they do sometimes. To have the resource of saying, well, you might want to talk to someone. Here's this YWCA crisis line, or here's this crisis line, or someone you could talk to, the national national domestic violence hotline, to have the resources. Let them understand that we have the Office of Family Safety. You can go there, orders of protections, and those sorts of information, because sometimes people just don't know how to stay safe. And sometimes, and we could have, twice this length of a webinar to talk about some of the things that people don't even realize are signs that their life could be in jeopardy. There's a whole session that we could have on just the issue of what it means to be strangled. That is a whole session. And once you understand that sign, that's a game changer for people. People don't understand that that means that the next time that could mean your life. So at the end of each of these webinars, we have nuggets of knowledge. And when we ask each of our panelists in 1 or 2 sentences, what is the key takeaway you'd like attendees to leave with today? I'll start with you again, Dr. Baker.
Just a takeaway, I would just say, we're focusing on support with it being DV Awareness Month. Just look at the signs of the people around you, because we all know, I'm a survivor myself. If you haven't experienced it yourself, somebody in your immediate family has, somebody at your church has. It could be your next door neighbor, it could be your best friend. And a lot of times, all we have to do is just listen and just notice the signs. So if someone does come to you, being in that type of situation, just be able to provide them with the resource, be able to be a listening ear, and just know that, be that safe place for them. Because sometimes if you're not, or if someone comes to you and you're not, and if you judge, and if you say the wrong thing, they could shut down, forever, and don't say anything else. And it could mean life or death. So if you're not aware, just notice the signs and just be a listening ear, and be able to just provide resources and support for anyone that you may cross paths with.
All right, Ms. Brown, what would you like to leave us with?
Man, I would like to know again the expansive definition of domestic violence, that is not just physical. And also to know, because it was mentioned in the Q&A about the perfect victim and how that could stop survivors from testifying. That still goes into victim blaming, that it's hard to spot who has suffered domestic violence. But when they do open up, yes, be a listening ear, yes, to give resources, but also take care of yourself as well, because you can internalize exactly what they experienced, what they've gone through, all those emotions they can attach to you. And the most smallest thing you can do is ask if they are okay and if their children use anything, because at the end of the day, kids are affected just as much as the adult. And again, have boundaries with it as well, not even just mental health boundaries, but physical boundaries, because if a person does go back and you get overly involved and want to save them, that can put you at risk as well. So make sure as you're being an advocate, take care of yourself in the meantime, and do little things to help them want to press charges if that is a route that they do want to take. But definitely take care of yourself in the midst of it. And also, mental health is real. Just as much as physical injuries can hurt, so does internal injuries hurt. So just as much as a hit can hurt to the head, TBI has an effect on the brain and your physical health as well. So please take care of yourself.
All right, and Diane.
Yeah, I mean, mainly, just utilize the first stops. Your great first stop is the YWCA Domestic Violence Hotline to connect you with a lot of what you need in safety planning. And your other, first stop can be Family Safety Center here on Murfreesboro Pike. And that you don't have to have, physical injuries to come in and get any of those aspects of help. Both the YWCA and Family Safety Centers are well versed in the damage that emotional abuse and manipulation can do as well. So we're all here to help.
Now, let me ask each of you that. I'll go to you, Diane. Let's say I'm in a situation. I want to get help. Do I have to have an appointment to come to the Family Safety Center? Do I have to have an appointment to call the Weaver Crisis Line?
Nope, you call them, any of them 24/7. You can come into the Family Safety Center 24/7. However, the after hours weekend work that our building does here is order of protection work. But for other matters, it's walk-in during normal operating hours.
And I will tell everyone this because often people ask us, this is free, Daphne, Dr.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes, it is absolutely free. And I would add, we have a crisis hotline, but we also have a text line, because we do understand that sometimes it takes somebody, some people they have to warm up to, well, they're not really sure they're being abused, or they want to know, want to ask questions and things like that. So we also have a text hotline as well. But does it cost anything? It absolutely does not. Sometimes we have families that come in and don't have anything but the clothes on their back. Like, we will provide services for you. We will meet you where you are. We will get the kids enrolled in school. We will get you vital documents that you need. Everything you need pretty much to get a fresh start. We'll start with just making the first, move and giving us a call and helping us and allowing us to help you, navigate your way through.
And our goal, as I tell everyone that will ever listen to me, is making Nashville the safest city for women and girls. And that's a very, very simplistic way of putting it. My dear friend Sean Henry, the CEO of the Predators, we say that all the time. And it's a real, and we take into account, we do know there are male victims of some domestic violence. We support them absolutely. It's just that that's our goal. We don't want to lose any more lives to domestic violence in this community. And I think if we work together, if we have the new programs, come up with better ideas, work very hard to make those who commit these atrocities, make sure that they are viewed as an example of, we're not going to take this in Nashville anymore. So thank you very much for all of us. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for providing the resources. I don't know if they put in the chat because I'm not good at following chats while I'm doing these. We did have some questions, but we don't really have time in this session for the Q&As, but you can follow up with any of these. Look them up on a website if you have access, or the YWCA. We can provide you with these resources because we want to make sure that everyone in the community is aware of all these various initiatives and all these various resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you.